What changed was not the object, it was where the evidence turned up. More than 4 billion miles from the Sun, beyond Pluto's orbit, New Horizons sent back images of a small world drifting in the dark. Arrokoth. Then the pictures arrived. It did not look like a place that had been reshaped, erased, or rebuilt. It looked old, unusually old. For a moment, just watch it rotate. A quiet object hanging in deep space, no dramatic activity, no towering storms, no familiar planetary spectacle. And that is the problem. If the best record of our solar system's beginnings survived anywhere, we would expect to find it on the worlds we know best. The planets should be the great archives. They are larger, brighter, easier to study. But Arrokoth appeared far more primitive than expected. Suddenly, the strongest evidence was not coming from the famous worlds. It was coming from a small object almost nobody had seen before. The New Horizons flyby turned a distant curiosity into a witness from the earliest stages of solar system formation. That shifts the pressure immediately. If familiar worlds have lost parts of their history, then size is no guarantee of truth. Visibility is no guarantee of evidence. And the farther scientists looked beyond Pluto, the harder it became to trust that the planet still held the clearest record of where everything began. What continued was the rewriting. Young planets were struck, melted, buried, and changed. Impacts slammed into their surfaces. Interior heat reshaped them from below. On some worlds, older terrain disappeared beneath newer layers. On others, chemistry in the atmosphere altered what had survived. Watch the timeline compress. A surface forms. It changes. Another layer arrives. Then another. Ancient material sinks beneath younger history. The inner planets were rewriting their own history.
Others remained pristine.
That creates a contradiction. If planets preserve the past, we should still be able to read the original record. But across Earth, Venus, Mars, and many large moons, enormous amounts of that record have been erased or altered by billions of years of planetary change. The discovery is not that evidence exists beyond Pluto. The discovery is that evidence vanished almost everywhere else. For the people trying to reconstruct the solar system's origin story, that changes everything. The worlds we know best become edited versions of history. The most studied places turn out to be some of the least pristine. And with every layer that buried something older, another possible answer disappeared, leaving the distant survivors carrying a larger share of the story. What changed was the environment. Far beyond Neptune, change slows almost to a stop. The Kuiper Belt is dark, cold, and quiet. For a moment, the explanation feels obvious. Nothing changed, so the evidence survived. But cold is not the most important clue. The clue is the shape. Look at Arrokoth carefully. It is not a single world. It looks like two separate bodies gently joined together. A contact binary. And suddenly the object starts telling a different story. For a moment, the mystery seems finished, but the shape creates a problem. Cold can explain survival. Cold cannot explain shape. Something had to create those two lobes. And whatever created them happened before the planets we know today were fully formed. Look at a young planet forming. Collisions strike at enormous speeds. Rock melts. Material is reshaped. Evidence is destroyed. Now look at Arrokoth. The two lobes are still there. The collision that joined them was so gentle that neither side shattered. not kilometers per second. Closer to the speed of a person walking. Not an impact. A touch. A cold, quiet object beside a glowing world still under construction. The contrast changes everything. If planets preserve their origins, then planet formation should reveal the evidence. Instead, much of the evidence was transformed during planet formation itself. The very process that created the worlds we recognize also altered the material scientists most want to examine. This is no longer just a story about distance. It is a story about what happens when worlds become planets. The familiar planets are not untouched records. They are records that have been edited by collisions, heating, separation, and billions of years of internal change. Growth destroyed information. And suddenly that frozen object beyond Pluto looks different. Arrokoth escaped what planets could not. The more successful a world became, the less certain its testimony now appears. What changed was the meaning of survival. Replay the solar system from the beginning, and two paths appear. One path leads to planets, collisions, heating, growth, interiors separating into layers, worlds becoming larger, more complex, and more familiar. The other path barely changes at all. Arrokoth remains small, cold, largely untouched. While planets continued evolving, it carried ancient material forward through roughly 4.5 billion years with far less alteration. That is the reversal. If the biggest worlds hold the most history, they should hold the best evidence. Instead, the best evidence survived in some of the smallest survivors. For a long time, it seemed natural to treat planets as the primary archive of solar system history. But planetary success became archival failure. The worlds that changed the most lost much of their original state. The solar system's unfinished survivors became its most valuable witnesses. And in the end, the evidence beyond Pluto was never preserved because it was important. It survived because it was left behind. The worlds that became planets rewrote their history. Arrokoth never got the chance. The evidence survived because it never became a planet.